The Orioles right now certainly not playing their best baseball as they were swept by the Cubs at home on Thursday night. But the New York Yankees not playing their best either, making for a really interesting series from the top two teams in the East coming up this weekend. But I'll recap the Orioles loss to Chicago, plus get you a few of the Orioles roster moves from Thursday, coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, July 12th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 8-0 loss to the Cubs on Thursday as the O's suffered their first home sweep in a long time. Tell you what went wrong in that one and what the Orioles do now is they've got the biggest series of the season starting tonight. Then talk about a few roster moves that the Orioles made on Thursday. Made a minor trade to pick up a depth reliever who has the stuff, at least the pure stuff, to help their bullpen at some point this year. And then made another bullpen move as Dillon Tate, after some struggles, is headed back down to AAA. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. So check out Booking.com for your stay today. So we will start this one on a Friday with, unfortunately, another Orioles loss. Final score from Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Thursday night, with me, unfortunately, in attendance for that one. The Chicago Cubs 8 and the Orioles nothing, and that completes the three-game sweep. The Cubs come into Camden Yards and take all three from the Orioles. The O's fall to 57 and 36 on the season. As I am recording right now, out of the corner of my eye, I am watching the ninth inning of Rays and Yankees. The Rays have a 5-3 lead at the Trop in the top of the ninth inning. So if Tampa Bay can hold on, the Orioles will remain with a 2-game lead in the division heading into this big series tonight. But the Orioles swept at home for the first time since late August of 2021 against the Rays. That is how long it's been. We know they went with the sweepless streak for a while, then were swept in St. Louis and in Houston earlier this year. But swept at home is a different beast, especially by a struggling Cubs team with, even with these 3 wins, is still 45 and 49 on the year. Definitely some tough baseball being played by the Orioles. But going to get you the 5 things you need to know from this Oriole loss. And the first thing you need to know is the Orioles bats just look incredibly tired at this point. I mean, coming off what was a crazy June with one off day and the toughest part of their schedule team-wise. They played amazing baseball. Then you get into July and you get a little bit of a break, but not too much on the schedule. You got to go out to the West Coast, a 6-game West Coast trip, and they played well enough. They won both series, taking 4 out of 6 against the Mariners and the A's. They come back home, and I think the Orioles would have loved if the All-Star break had started 1 week earlier and they were off right now instead of having to play baseball games. And they've just looked like a tired team that's been through a slog of an early part of the schedule and are waiting for the All-Star break. The issue is that even though the break's close, right, there's only 3 more games before they get that All-Star break. One, they have 5 All-Stars. Congratulations to Anthony Santander, who was added to the team on Thursday, with Kyle Tucker being injured and not being able to play in the game. So the O's with the 5 now. But the other issue is they've still got to play what, to this point, is the biggest series of the season with the Yankees coming in this weekend. So hopefully the bats can get some sort of reset with New York coming in. It's just that, hey, they're going to need to hit. To beat the Yankees in this big series, they're going to need to hit. This is a team that's been one of the best offenses in baseball, still averaging 5 runs per game, which leads Major League Baseball. They've still been, as a whole, great all year. They're going to break out of it because they're that good, and hopefully that does start tonight. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles' second straight shutout loss, which was, that's the other offensive issue. Not going to see this team get shut out back-to-back games a lot, but I do think the Orioles have kind of one roster problem just at the moment. I don't think overall for the entirety of the season, but just at the moment in terms of their position players, and it comes in center field. Now, the Orioles have 2 guys who can play center. We know Cedric Mullins plays it at a Gold Glove level. He's had his struggles. The bats started to pick up a little bit in general. And then they also have Colton Cowser, who I'm not sold at. Now, he is certainly not the defender Mullins is out there. He is an elite defensive corner outfielder. He's been arguably the best left fielder in baseball this year, and he can certainly play a good, solid center field, and I feel fine at this point. He's raised the bar for me with his defense in center. The issue with those two guys right now, and it doesn't mean it's going to last all year. Now, Colton Cowser, when he was hitting in general in April, he was also hitting lefties, while Cedric Mullins wasn't. Mullins has still not hit lefties, hitting 156 with a 16 WRC plus against lefties on the year. But now Cowser, with his overall struggles, a lot of them have come against left-handers, and he's down to a 191 average with an 84 WRC plus against lefties. That is why when the Orioles see a left-handed starter, generally you'll see Cowser still starting in center field because he can play out there and he's been better than Mullins in those spots. But the issue is right now, neither Mullins or Cowser can hit a left-hander. And if the rest of the Orioles offense is humming, it's fine because you just put whoever you choose to start, you bat them ninth, eighth or ninth, you have them play good defense in center field, and you have them help the team there, and the rest of the offense picks up the slack. But when the Orioles' rest of the offense is struggling, as we know that is going on right now, and we saw the Orioles face left-handed starters the last two nights with seeing the always funky and deceptive and nasty Justin Steele on Thursday, and they saw Shota Imanaga on Wednesday night, and both of them shut them down. The Orioles did not score a run in the last two games. They started Cowser Wednesday. They started Mullins Thursday. It's an issue. And although they're hitting at the bottom of the lineup, when they're not producing at all and you can't count on them for anything from lefties, it gives you the question, okay, who do you play? Because although Austin Hayes was a center fielder at one point, and maybe you could put him out there, and we know the Orioles were trying Jorge Mateo at times over the last 2 years in center field. So you got a couple more guys who you could put in that position. I don't think the Orioles trust Hayes or Mateo in that spot. So you're kind of at the point where you have to play Mullins or Cowser in center field the way the roster is set up, but neither of them can hit a lefty. So it really puts you in a tough spot if, the rest of the offense isn't humming when you face a left-handed starter. So you could think about, maybe they just put Hayes in center, Kjerstad in left. Well, that could help you offensively, but that is not a defense you want, especially at Oriole Park. Maybe you think about, do you put Mateo in center? Well, that means you would have to play Ramon Arias every time, and you don't really want him in the lineup either. So I say all that to say, and there's not a lot of help coming from AAA because your best offensive option in the outfield down there is Kyle Stowers, who can play a little center, but also is a left-handed hitter and a guy who you don't generally want playing against lefties as well. The Orioles are kind of one right-handed bat away. Now you can say, hey, isn't that bat Kobe Mayo? It could be, but he can't play center field. I think more specifically, the hole in the roster is a right-handed hitting center fielder. Of course, I would love for it to be someone better than Ryan McKenna. McKenna's been the guy over the last few years that has played this role. The Orioles have brought in and out Peyton Burdick a couple of times, but he's currently not with the organization. They don't really have that guy right now. So I don't think it's likely the Orioles would try to add a bat at the deadline. But if they do, look for them to get some sort of cheap veteran right-handed hitting center field option. Maybe not as a long-term fix, because I think eventually Cowser at least will start to hit lefties again, but as someone they could potentially plug in for a little bit just to help the offense against left-handers. Third thing you need to know from this loss, Albert Suarez was quite okay. He was quite average in this game. That's kind of the best way that I can put it. Coming off two great starts, two of his best in an Oriole uniform, this really was not. 5 innings, 4 runs on 6 hits, 4 Ks and 2 walks for Suarez on 90 pitches against this Cubs offense. They hit him hard. He looked pretty good. I mean, through 4 innings, he allowed just 1 run, and he was looking like he was on his way to another, strong 6-inning start, keeping the Orioles in the game. And then things just got away from him in the 5th. The Cubs scoring 3 runs against him in that 5th inning. There was really a couple unfortunate breaks, a couple of ground balls where there were really tough plays for both Gunnar Henderson and Jordan Westberg on the left side of the infield, but plays that definitely you can't say should have been made. They were really tough, and they were scored a single and a double. It's not like errors were involved, but plays that maybe could have been made and weren't, and could have ended the inning, instead made it 2nd and 3rd with 1 out, and Suarez just couldn't get the big out. The Cubs bring across 3 and kind of break the game open a little bit. I mean, his fastball was fine. It was his usual 4-seam fastball, threw it more than half the time. He just didn't have any of his off-speed stuff. Cutter, changeup, curveball, it really didn't matter. He tried to throw all 3 at different times. You could tell just didn't have the best command, didn't have the best break on those pitches, and those were getting hit all over the yard as well by Cubs hitters. Just kind of a meh start from Albert Suarez. Fourth thing you need to know from the shutout loss on Thursday is that, hey, it wasn't pretty once again, but you do have to give credit to what Cole Irvin did for the Orioles. Now, You need these kind of outings to get better eventually when he's in there in mop-up duty, but he allowed the O's to save the bullpen. After Suarez came out, Irvin came in. It was a 4-0 game. He didn't necessarily pitch well. He allowed 4 runs on 7 hits, 1 strikeout, a homer, and no walks, but he finished the game. He pitched the final 4 innings of this one, and again, he did allow 4 runs. It wasn't great. He allowed the Cubs to completely break open this game, but hey, the Orioles didn't score. They weren't winning no matter if Irvin went 4 scoreless or did what he did. And this is back-to-back appearances for Irvin where he's come in a game the Orioles have gotten blown out. And while he hasn't pitched that well, he's covered, 3-4 innings in relief and has completely saved the Oriole bullpen. And again, I am concerned with how Irvin looks in general. It's starting to make me think, like, how much can he really help this team, whether it's as a starter or a reliever down the stretch. But one thing that's good is he completed those 4 innings. He didn't get to a point where Hyde had to take him out and go to another pitcher. And that's so important because the Orioles have this gigantic series with the Yankees starting tonight, and they have, at least for game 1, the entire bullpen available, except for, of course, Irvin in this game 1 against New York. That could be a huge advantage for the O's. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 8-0 loss to the Cubs on Thursday night that completed their first time being swept at home since August of 2021 is that I just wanted to give some love to Jorge Lopez. Feeling good for him. After he had kind of the blow up with the Mets where, he just kind of lost it and threw his glove into the stands and was released. It was cool to see the Cubs sign him to a minor league deal and then eventually call him up to the big leagues. He didn't look amazing. He gave up a hit and a walk, but struck out 2 through a scoreless 9th inning to close out the Cubs win over the O's on Thursday night. And I'm always going to be cheering for Jorge Lopez. He meant a lot to this Orioles team when he was here. You can tell the Orioles organization means a lot to him. And I wish him the best. And I'm happy that he does have a major league job in a major league bullpen once again. But the Orioles fall 8-0. They were swept by the Cubs. It's not great now. You hope they can turn it around tonight against the Yankees. But even though the present isn't looking great, the Orioles are still trying to build out a roster that can compete in the future of this season and try and win a division. And sometimes, hopefully soon, that will be big trades that will really help the major league team. And sometimes it's minor trades around the edges that come up a little bit later and really help your team. And I think their acquisition of right-handed reliever Colin Selby on Thursday could be one of those moves on the margins that helps them down the stretch. I'll tell you why coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Booking.com. Yeah. Now, in this Major League Baseball season, and with summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival's city. Now, I don't love New York. I've talked about it, but hey, the Orioles play the Yankees starting tonight. Then they don't play them again until the second to last series of the year in late September. And I might have to head up to Yankee Stadium and check out New York for that one, because that one could be for the division. And the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals, even New York. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or in the Booking.com app. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So yeah, it was a tough series. The O's were just swept by the Chicago Cubs, but a little bit of good news. The Yankees lost another series. They're playing some bad baseball. It was as I was recording out of the corner of my eye, watching the wild end to that one, Jose Caballero making an insane over-the-shoulder basket catch to save the game in the ninth. Rays beat the Yankees 5-4 on Thursday night. So the Orioles lead remains 2 games over the Yankees heading into this pivotal series in Baltimore this weekend, which means all the O's have to do is win 1 out of 3, and they will go into the All-Star break in first place. But this Orioles team is going to need a lot of depth down the season if they want to win this division. They added a depth piece on Thursday, making a under-the-radar minor trade with the Kansas City Royals, acquiring right-handed pitcher Colin Selby for cash considerations from the Royals. Now, Selby was DFA'd by the Royals last week, and the Orioles did what they've done with many players over the years, most notably Ryan O'Hearn. They jumped the waiver line because they're so good. They're low on the waiver order. They offered up the Royals something in a trade instead of just claiming, and they said, here's some cash. The Royals said, that works for us, and Colin Selby is now an Oriole. Now, he does have options, which is great, and the Orioles immediately optioned him to AAA Norfolk. He is on the 40-man roster, but he will begin his time in Norfolk. Now, who is Colin Selby? Colin Selby is a 26-year-old right-handed pitcher who was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates in the 16th round of the 2018 MLB draft out of Randolph-Macon College. Shout out to Division III baseball. Another D3, Day 3 guy was Colin Selby. Now, he was initially a starter, but as he moved up through the Pittsburgh organization, he became a relief pitcher and made his big league debut with the Pirates last season. In 24 innings with the Pirates in 21 appearances in 2023, it didn't go great. He had a 9.00 ERA. However, that was a little bit of bad luck. His FIP was only 4.80. His xFIP was 3.94. Basically, he pitched much better than a 9.00 ERA would tell you in those 24 innings. And he struck out a good amount of batters, had a 26% strikeout rate, 13% walk rate was a little concerning, but in general, he showed off some good stuff. And that is the big thing for Colin Selby. All of these stuff plus models, which look at just how good is your stuff. It's not about location, not about results, just about stuff. They love Colin Selby. And specifically, they love his breaking balls. He is a 4-pitch pitcher. It's a sinker, a slider, a curveball, and a 4-seam fastball, thrown in that order of how often he has thrown them, at least at the AAA level this season. Now, he has pitched a little bit in the bigs this year. In April of this season, after he did not make the Pirates opening day roster, he was traded for another minor leaguer over to the Kansas City Royals and did pitch very briefly for the Royals this season. Actually appeared in 2 games out of the Royals bullpen this year. In 3 innings, he allowed 2 runs on 2 hits. He did not strike out anyone, and he walked 2. Again, very small sample size. Spent most of this year in AAA with Kansas City, where in 20 innings of work out of the bullpen, again, had a 5.85 ERA, but a much lower FIP, getting a little unlucky again. And the strikeout numbers were really good. 31% strikeout rate, that is great. 9% walk rate, that's pretty much around league average. Those are really good strikeout to walk numbers that Selby had in AAA. And it's because of the stuff he throws up there. Now, his number one most used pitch is his sinker. He throws it 38% of the time, and it's not a strikeout pitch. Doesn't really get swing and miss on it. It averages about 95. He can be up to 97, 98 sometimes with that pitch. It gets hit hard sometimes. It's probably the pitch that results in hits the most, but he looks at it for strike one. He's tried to get ground balls with it. It's the pitch he's most comfortable throwing for a strike. But his number 2 pitch, that is, I think, the moneymaker for Colin Selby. His slider, which Stuff Plus loves, is one of the better sliders you'll see in AAA this year. Throws it 28% of the time at 87 miles per hour. AAA opponents hitting just 0.91 against Colin Selby's slider with a 53% swing and miss rate. That is crazy elite on that slider. Then you throw in a curveball, which he throws about 24% of the time, opponents hitting under 200 and whiffing 44% of the time. He has got a very, very interesting breaking ball mix. Also throws a 4-seam fastball, which is also 95, 96, and has gotten hit as well. Here's the issue with Colin Selby. You're saying, Connor, if he has these amazing breaking balls, why does he have such bad stats at times? And why has he not gotten much of a shot generally in the big leagues, even though he's 26 years old? He hasn't found a fastball that's worked for him. He's toyed between the 2-seamer and the 4-seamer, and either one just gets hit hard. And although his slider and curveball are so good, you still need a fastball to throw for a strike, and guys jump on it, and he hasn't yet committed to being one of those guys who throws his breaking balls more than his fastballs. What I see the Orioles doing with Selby as they get him down in AAA Norfolk for a little bit is telling him, hey, you can still have the sinker in your back pocket. When you need a strike, you can certainly throw it, but the curveball and the slider are going to be your top two most used pitches, and that is how you're going to get guys out. He's going to still need to throw the fastballs, but I think they're going to make the slider his main pitch, and we could see him into the Orioles bullpen. That stuff is good enough that I think there's a really good chance Colin Selby, at the very least, pitches a couple of games out of the Orioles bullpen this year and has a chance to figure it out with the Orioles and be at least a solid middle reliever for this team. I've talked about guys that they have brought in, right, that have had some interesting numbers, some solid stuff that could help them. Of all these kind of minor-ish trades on the fringes of the bullpen, in terms of stuff plus, like Selby outranks all of them with just those breaking balls that he throws and how good they can be. So a little bit of an exciting under-the-radar pickup that the Orioles made on Thursday. But it was not their only roster move before Thursday's game. They also made a change to the big league bullpen. Dillon Tate is back in AAA, and Burch Smith is here with the Orioles for the first time. Tell you why they made the move, who is Smith, and what it means for the bullpen to finish off this Friday episode coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here at Locked On Orioles, we pride ourselves in getting you the latest news for the O's. Whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs, it is year-round. And you know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. So don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A-plus rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. And be sure to mention Locked On Orioles at checkout, and you'll receive a $250 discount off their services at Tax Network USA. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost that you get from an outfit that makes you look really, really good? Well, that's what you can get at Stitch Fix. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist at Stitch Fix that helps you find new, on-trend favorites that will certainly work for you. You just give your stylist your size, style, and budget preferences. You order boxes when you want, how you want, no subscription required. And then they send 5 just for you pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. And here's the easy part. You keep what works, you send back the rest, shipping, returns, exchanges, all free. Way easier than shopping in the store. So it's style that makes you feel as you look. Now is the best time to get started at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $100 off. That's $25 off your first 4 fixes for a limited time only. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $100 off. One more time, stitchfix.com/MLB. Must redeem within 7 days of sign up. Offer does not include kids fixes. So the Orioles made one other bullpen move on Thursday before losing to the Cubs. Besides trading for Colin Selby, a guy who I think could help them in the pen down the stretch this year, they also made a roster move on the big league level. Burch Smith, a right-handed pitcher who the Orioles signed to a minor league deal just a few weeks back, has been added to the 40-man roster. To make room for him, the Orioles transferred Kyle Bradish from the 15-day IL to the 60-day injured list. Bradish, of course, out for the season after his elbow surgery. When you get moved to the 60-day injured list, you no longer count against the 40-man roster. Once the Orioles add him back, they would have to, around opening day of next year, then you start to count again before they can then add him back to the 60-day IL. But for now, Kyle Bradish doesn't count against the 40-man. That opens up space for Burch Smith. And to make room for Smith, the Orioles have optioned right-handed pitcher Dillon Tate down to AAA Norfolk. Now let's start with Tate, who for the second time has ended up in AAA this year after just being an amazing part of the Oriole bullpen from 2020 through 2022. Had the weird arm injuries where he never got surgery, but he missed all of last season, came back this year, was struggling to get his velocity up, finally did get the velo where he wanted it. And the fastball velo is still a little lower than usual, but it's 94. He's usually 95. That's totally fine for Dillon Tate. He just has not been the same pitcher. 29 outings for the O's this year, 33 and a third innings with a 4.59 ERA and a 4.33 xFIP. His strikeouts are the lowest of his career, just 16%. His walks at 6% are up since 2022 as well. I don't know, the 281 batting average against him is much higher than we're used to for him. It's a little bit of bad luck BABIP-wise. Like, he's given up some blue pits, but not that he was a huge bat misser. He's never been a big strikeout guy. He's always been a big ground ball guy. But his 51% ground ball rate this year, also the lowest of his career, which concerns you a little bit that it might be more about the stuff just not moving and sinking and spinning like it usually does. Now, his sweeper's been pretty good this year, but his sinker has been hit harder than ever before. And it was a tough June for Dillon Tate. He had a good April. He wasn't here for a lot of May, but when he was good. Then the calendar turned to June. He had a 5.11 ERA in June, and he's followed that up with 4 innings in July in which he's allowed 6 runs on 11 hits in those 4 innings. That is just not going to play in the Oriole bullpen. And it is nice that Tate still has options, so you can just send him back down to AAA without losing him. And it's a good time to option him, right? You got, when they made the move 4 days before the All-Star break, then you get a 4-day All-Star break. Tate would be eligible to come back, I think, next week. No, well, not next week, 2 weeks from now, like a week after the All-Star break, which is not bad at all. It gives him time to reset, and with the All-Star break being built in, he wouldn't have to miss as many games if the Orioles do want to bring him back fairly quickly and just kind of want him to reset in AAA. I think overall, I'm still worried about Dillon Tate. It hasn't been good lately. And you can be like, wow, wasn't Dillon Tate one of their reliable relievers? In theory, yes, but lately, no. He was hurting the O's, and you could tell, like, Brandon Hyde was not using him at all in anything close to high leverage situations. So at this point, it's like he's struggling. He has options. Let's at least get someone else up here in the big leagues who could maybe, if we give a couple of chances and looks good, could be pushed into high leverage. And maybe, just maybe, that guy could be Burch Smith. Now, Burch Smith, 34-year-old right-hander who pitched for the Marlins for most of this year, then was DFA'd by Miami, and the Orioles brought him in on a minor league contract. Now, Smith doesn't have the kind of pure stuff that a guy like Colin Selby does, but he has some interesting parts of his pitch mix that I think made the Orioles want to go after him. Now, I talked about Burch Smith on an episode a week or two ago after the signing that you can go back and check out, but generally for Smith this season, he, in terms of his offerings on the mound, it is the kitchen sink approach. He's got 6 pitches. He really throws 3 of them. It's a 4-seamer, a curveball, and a cutter that he mostly goes to. He has dropped in a sweeper, changeup, and sinker at times this year, but really those top 3 pitches, that is where he wants to go. Now, he hasn't gotten a lot of swing and miss, which has been some of his issue. In 25 games with the Marlins this year, 29 2/3 innings, 4.25 ERA, 3.07 FIP. It's a 17% strikeout rate. That's low, but also a 7% walk rate, which is fairly low as well. He is a strike thrower. He's hunting ground balls. 47% ground ball rate this year is the highest of his career. And we'll see, what the Orioles might have him doing. They got him in AAA for just a little bit of time. He only pitched 2 innings for the Norfolk Tide, so not like they got a crazy amount of in-game work with him. 1 hit, no runs, 2 Ks, and no walks in those 2 innings. But they were working with him in bullpens and side sessions to try and make a couple changes if they would like to. It's been kind of a crazy winding road for Burch Smith. He debuted in 2013 with the Padres, then had so many injuries. He didn't get back to the bigs till 2018. Then he went to Japan and Korea in 2022 and 23 before returning to the bigs this year. It's been a roller coaster ride, but maybe, just maybe, he's got the goods that can help this Oriole bullpen at least get to the trade deadline. Then, as we know, we hope they bring in at least 1 and maybe 2 reinforcements for the bullpen via trade, but hopefully Burch Smith can be a guy that can get them there. I just think he'll be kind of down the ladder middle reliever. Brandon Hyde will get him in 1 or 2 low leverage spots, see how he looks, and then decide whether or not, hey, maybe we want to give him a little leverage outing to see if he can really help this bullpen. And we didn't see Burch Smith pitch on Thursday. He was warming in the bullpen, but, Cole Irvin did cover those final 4 innings, so they didn't have to go to Smith. I have a feeling if there's a chance for it, he will make his Oriole debut this weekend against the Yankees. The biggest series of the year so far. Orioles with a 2-game lead over the Yanks, 3-game series here in Baltimore. Orioles 5-2 against the Yankees this year. And it all starts tonight at 7:05. Garrett Cole taking the bump. He made his first start of the year against the Orioles at Yankee Stadium. Didn't look great, but was on a pitch count. He really hasn't looked great all year so far. Has not gone past 5 innings in any start. Last time out against Boston, he gave up 4 in 4 1/3. He's got a 6.75 ERA and 4 starts off the injured list. Hopefully he continues to struggle. He'll face off against the rookie lefty Cade Povich, who is coming off of the worst Orioles start of the year. He allowed 8 runs in an inning plus in Oakland over the weekend. Povich had one really, really interesting start at Yankee Stadium earlier this year, where he pitched 4 2/3 and gave up 1 run on 1 hit, but also walked 5 and struck out 1. It was a crazy tightrope act. At this point, if he's only going to give up 1 run, I don't really care how he does it, but the O's definitely need a bounce-back start from Cade Povich in Game 1. Game 2 is Saturday at 4:05. Luis Gil, who is having a Cy Young-level season until he faced the Orioles the last time that he was up against them at Yankee Stadium, and the O's just absolutely obliterated him in that start. He lasted an inning and a third and allowed 7 runs. I'll take that again. And he goes up against Grayson Rodriguez, who's been throwing the ball pretty well lately for the Orioles. And finally, it all finishes on Sunday with kind of an odd start time. This is the Roku Sunday morning baseball game that you can watch on the Roku app for free. It starts at 11:35 a.m. Eastern time, Yankees and Orioles. Carlos Rodon goes for the Yankees. He has had some bad starts lately. The Orioles were all over him at Oriole Park earlier this year. And then it's Dean Kramer, who's had 1 good start and 1 bad start since he came off the IL with the triceps issue. Hopefully he'll flip it back to the good start on Sunday morning. And then I will be back actually for some extra podcasts this next week. You're used to me doing 5 episodes a week. How about 6? Because next week is the All-Star break and the draft. Yes, the MLB draft begins at 7 p.m. on Sunday night. The Orioles have picks number 22 and 32 to go along with their second round pick as well. So they got 3 picks Sunday night. So here's how we're going to do the podcast. You can expect an episode in your feed on Sunday afternoon. After the Sunday morning game ends, it'll be a podcast that will just be fully recapping the 3-game series against the Yankees. Hopefully it's the O's extending their division lead. Then there will be an episode on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And on Monday evening, we will recap all of the Orioles draft picks from day 1 and day 2 of the draft and get you a little insight on each of those guys. Then for the rest of the week, we'll continue to cover the draft. We'll cover all-star festivities and start getting you more and more ready for the trade deadline. A lot of fun stuff coming up on a 6-episode week. And again, I am back on Sunday to recap this huge Orioles-Yankees series in Baltimore. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.